the digital hiss of an open channel. Green pixels formed a face, gaunt and sweating, in the high-value target's compound. He's static. Window, 3rd floor. The voice belonged to SEAL Commander Thorne. He was 50 meters away, smelling the concrete dust. Captain Elena Markova was 5,000 kilometers away in a sterile toki, smelling stale coffee, her hands flying over a signals intercept board. Eagle 1, you have PID, Thorne continued, his voice pure ice. You are cleared. Take the shot. A waveform spiked on Elena's secondary screen. A whisper, a different voice from the same room, speaking a language the SEALs wouldn't know. Wait! Elena yelled, violating 3 layers of comms protocol. Captain, you are not on the kinetic net. Thorne's voice was a razor. Stay. Out. Sir, the HVT is not your target. He just said the activation phrase for sundown. Thorne's breathing stopped. He was mid-breath. Sundown wasn't a target code. It was the distress call for their deep-cover DIA asset, Agent Kale, who had been reported dead 6 months ago. His finger, already tightening on the trigger, froze. 6 months earlier. The projector beam cut through the chilled, sterile air of the briefing room, illuminating a complex spiderweb of names and affiliations on the main screen. The air tasted of industrial carpet and faint burnt coffee. The target, the alchemist, is not a traditional insurgent, Captain Elena Markova said, her voice steady, betraying none of the tension she felt. Her station, a small lectern with a laptop, felt like an island in a sea of men clad in sterile camouflage uniforms. He is a broker. He doesn't trade in ideology. He trades in chaos. Our primary objective should not be to kill him. A chair scraped. Not killing him, a voice drawled, is a bold strategy for a war. Elena didn't look. She knew that voice. Commander Thorne, leader of the SEAL element, sat in the back, arms crossed, exuding an aura of coiled, kinetic energy. He was a man who saw the world as a series of problems to be solved, usually with explosives. My analysis, Elena continued, clicking to the next slide, based on MISO protocols, suggests he can be influenced. His network is transactional. If we can prove we are a more reliable partner than his current suppliers, or a more terrifying threat, we can co-opt his network instead of just decapitating it. We turn him into an asset. Thorne stood up. He wasn't tall, but he occupied the space of a larger man. He walked to the front, ignoring Elena, and pointed at the screen. Captain Markova, I read your brief. It's academic. He said the word like it was a disease. You're SWIOP. You think you can talk this guy into surrender. I don't need to know his childhood trauma or his favorite color. I need to know one thing. Where is he? He turned to the room, to his men. We don't need to know why he's bad. We just need a grid coordinate. Nervous laughter rippled through the SEALs. Elena felt the heat rise in her neck. This was her dual-role conflict, crystallized. She was an analyst in a world of operators. She was trained to see the why as the battlefield, while they only saw the where. Commander, she said, forcing her voice to remain flat. If you just decapitate him, another alchemist will take his place in 6 months. My model offers a permanent solution. Your model involves leaflets. It involves intelligence, Elena countered. Something your direct action-only approach seems to be missing. The silence that followed was absolute. Thorne's eyes narrowed. He took a step toward her. He didn't just command his team, he dominated any room he entered. Elena held her ground, her heart hammering against her ribs, not in fear, but in pure, unadulterated frustration. She was a captain in the United States Army, assigned to this JSOTF for her specific expertise. She was not a secretary. A younger officer, one of Thorne's lieutenants, broke the silence, trying to diffuse the situation with a misplaced joke. "With all due respect, ma'am," the lieutenant said, "the commander is just saying we need trigger pullers for this. And, well, you're not a sniper." The taunt hung in the air, precise and devastating. It wasn't just an observation, it was a classification. It placed her firmly in the other category, the non-lethal, the support, the female. Elena looked from the lieutenant to Thorne. The commander didn't react, which was in itself a reaction. He condoned it. He had made his point. She felt the humiliation, hot and sharp. She had spent a decade earning her rank, her doctorate in behavioral psychology, her mastery of 4 languages, and in this room, it was all erased by the fact that she didn't carry a 300 Win Mag. Thorne turned back to the screen. "Your presentation is over, Captain." He dismissed her, just like that. Elena's hands were shaking as she closed her laptop. The men were already breaking, moving to the coffee machine, their voices low, planning the real mission. She felt utterly isolated, a ghost in her own operation. She was packing her briefcase when Thorne's voice cut through her exit. "Markova." She turned. He was alone, the others having filed out. "You're assigned to me now," he said. It wasn't an offer. "The general thinks your perspective is valuable." "I see. I don't, but I follow orders." He picked up a printed copy of her brief, looked at it with disgust, and tossed it into the burn bag. "I don't have time for your social experiment," he said. "The rest of my team is out hunting. You'll be here, in the Tau Sea. You wanted to analyze? Analyze." He pointed to a small, windowless alcove at the far end of the operations center, next to the comms servers. It was the digital noise station, the place they put junior analysts to sift through terabytes of static. It was the ultimate dismissal. He wasn't just ignoring her, he was burying her. "Monitor the noise," Thorne ordered, his back already to her as he walked away. "Let me know if you find anything real." The alcove Thorne had assigned her was generous. It was a glorified closet, smelling of hot server fans and ozone, tucked behind the main communications rack. The ambient noise was a high-frequency whine that she knew would be embedded in her skull within an hour. Her terminal was a last-generation model, its casing scarred. The primary screen flickered with a faint green hum, a sign of a dying capacitor. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. She spent the first 3 hours just getting operational, a demeaning process that involved bartering for cables and a decent chair. The final hurdle was bandwidth. The comms tech, a specialist who looked barely 20, guarded his server rack like a dragon. "Look, Captain," he said, not looking up from his diagnostic screen. "Commander Thorne has all kinetic comms prioritized for near real-time data. That's the SEAL's video feeds, drone uplinks, comms. I'm not asking for their bandwidth specialist," Elena said, her patience worn thin. "I'm asking for a dedicated slice of the noise floor feed, the raw, unfiltered SIGINT. That's just it. The noise is terabytes an hour. The system auto-purges it to make room for the real intel. If I open that pipe for you, it slows down the primary analysis feed for everyone." Everyone meaning Commander Thorne. He finally met her eyes. Yeah, everyone meaning the commander. Here it was, the dual conflict. The good soldier in her, the captain, wanted to follow the chain of command, work within the parameters she'd been given, and not make waves. She should just accept the low-priority, thrice-filtered data feed she was being offered. But the analyst in her, the rebel, knew that was garbage. The real intel, the subtle patterns, the mistakes, they were always in the noise. They were in the static between the official transmissions. Thorne had insulted her by assigning her to this post. But her training screamed that this was, paradoxically, the only place the real answer could be found. She couldn't win by being a good soldier. She could only win by being a good analyst, which, in this environment, meant being a bad soldier. "Specialist," Elena said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial calm. "Your job is to protect the network. My job is to find the bad guy. Right now, the bad guy is in your network. We just don't know where. Thorne's real intel has been getting his men shot." The tech flinched. He knew about the ambush. "Give me the raw feed," she continued. "Run it through a secondary buffer. Don't allocate it. Just fail to purge it for, say, a 6-hour rolling window. No one will notice the lag. And if they do, I'll say I spilled coffee on the terminal and you were helping me fix it." It was a risk. She was asking him to lie to his command. The tech stared at her, then at his screen, then back to her. He didn't say anything. He just typed a series of commands, his knuckles rapping the keys. A torrent of data flooded her screen, raw, chaotic, and beautiful. Waveforms, text streams, packet data, all waterfalling past her eyes. 6-hour window, he said gruffly, turning his back. "Don't spill your coffee." "Thank you, Specialist." She was in. For the next 8 hours, Elena lived in that noise. She ate a protein bar without tasting it. The talk behind her was a storm of activity. Thorne launched another fruitless raid on a suspected safe house, but she filtered it out. She built algorithms, keyword flagged for dialect variations, for specific slang. She was a digital archaeologist, sifting through the dust. If she found nothing, she wouldn't just be wrong. She would have confirmed Thorne's bias that she was a waste of resources. She would be sent packing. Her career stalled, the taunt, "You're not a sniper," ringing in her ears. Then, at 02 Uncertain Zulu, she saw it. It wasn't loud. It was the opposite. It was a whisper, buried deep in a civilian cellular frequency, using an encryption method that was almost academic. It was complex, elegant, and completely outdated. A professional would never use it. A child couldn't. It was too smart and too stupid, a perfect contradiction. Her fingers flew. It wasn't a military signal. It wasn't insurgent comms. It was something else. She managed to isolate and decrypt a tiny fragment of the header. It wasn't a message. It was a tag. A single code phrase repeated on a loop, like a digital beacon. Sundown. Elena stared at the word. It meant nothing to her. It wasn't in any of the JSOTF codebooks. It wasn't tied to the alchemist. It was just there, a ghost in the machine. A flicker of pure, cold vindication ran up her spine. This was it. This was Thorne's real intel. He just didn't know it yet. She saved the file, encrypted it with her own keys, and set her system to hunt for that signal, and that signal alone. She now had a secret. It took 48 hours for Thorne to build his new operation. He didn't consult Elena. He didn't even look in her direction. He moved with a coiled, angry energy, huddling with his team, running briefs in the sealed-off bubble room, and drinking coffee so black it looked like crude oil. Elena watched him from her digital closet. She had spent the last 2 days meticulously mapping the sundown signal. It was faint, it was smart, and it was deliberately hiding in the noise. But it was also predictable. It surfaced at 27 Zulu and 1417 Zulu every single day for for exactly 3 minutes. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a heartbeat. She had no authority to present this. It was an anomaly, not actionable intelligence. Not to a man like Thorne. He would see it as a distraction. At 2200 Zulu, the TOC-wide ops light switched from green to red. Thorne's snatch and grab was a go. Elena put on her headset, patching into the main kinetic net. She wasn't required to, but she was a masochist. Her screens split. On one, her noise data streamed. On the other, a drone's thermal feed showed 2 armored vehicles, call sign Ghost, rolling to a stop 2 blocks from a darkened apartment building. Ghost 1, this is Aegis Actual. Thorne's voice came over the net, crisp and cold from the TOC's command chair. We have PID on the asset, a local human source. He's solid. He confirms target is inside, 3rd floor, north apartment. Copy Actual, replied the team leader on the ground, moving to breach. Elena watched the green and white thermal heat signatures of the seals stack up on the door. It was a perfect textbook assault. Fast, violent, professional. Breach, breach, breach. The door icon on the schematic flashed red, then open. The comms net filled with the sound of muffled shouts, boot steps on hardwood, and the hydraulic thump of a door ram. Elena held her breath. She didn't want this to fail. That was the lie she told herself. The truth, the ugly, secret part of her, needed this to fail. She needed Thorne to be wrong. She needed him to be so demonstrably, catastrophically wrong that he would be forced to listen to the one person in the room he had dismissed. She needed his arrogance to hit a wall. Then she heard the voice on the net. Not Thorne, but the ground truth from the team leader. Actual, this is Ghost 1. The apartment is clear. A beat of static. Say again, Ghost 1? Thorne's voice was dangerously quiet. It's a dry hole, sir. Place is swept clean. Not even dust. They knew we were coming. Elena closed her eyes, and the 2 warring parts of her brain collided. First came the cold, sharp, and deeply satisfying spike of vindication. He was wrong. I was right. It lasted 3 seconds. It was immediately overwhelmed by a wave of professional guilt. Her job was not to be right. Her job was to help the mission succeed. And in her isolation, she had failed. She had sat on her sundown intel, nursing her wounded pride, while Thorne's team walked into a useless, high-risk op. A dry hole wasn't just a failure. It was a beacon. It told the alchemist exactly what JSOTF was looking for, and where. It made her own job infinitely harder. All call signs. Thorne's voice was a low growl. RTB, now. The red ops light switched back to green an hour later. The sound of the talk was different. The low-level chatter was gone. The only noise was the clack of Thorne's boots on the raised flooring as he strode from the command platform directly to her station. He didn't stop in front of it. He stopped inside it, crowding her small space, forcing her to lean back in her chair. He smelled of sweat, rage, and burnt coffee. He pointed a thick finger at her main screen, where the sundown data was, still innocuously minimized. You're the intel hotshot, he spat. You're the one who sees the patterns. Commander, my brief said, your brief, he cut her off, didn't stop my team from hitting an empty building. Your intelligence didn't stop this. Elena felt the accusation land. It was illogical. It was unfair. He had benched her. He had ignored her. He had given her a broken terminal in a closet. And now he was blaming her for his own failure. She finally understood. He didn't see her as a soldier to be utilized. He saw her as a rival. He saw her as the person responsible for proving him wrong, not the one responsible for helping him be right. He wasn't giving her a mission. He was setting her up to fail. The asset was bad, Thorne continued, his voice dropping. The human was a setup. We're compromised. There's a leak. He leaned in closer. You wanted to find a pattern? Fine. He slammed his hand on her desk, rattling her monitor. Find me the source of the leak. It wasn't a request. It was an order, given from a place of pure, white-hot fury. He wasn't asking for her help. He was using her as a scapegoat. He was handing her an impossible, toxic task. Find the traitor he couldn't, and he was daring her to fail. Find me the leak, he repeated, or pack your bags and get the hell off my talk floor. Are we clear, Captain? Crystal, Commander, Elena said, her voice a perfect frozen calm. He turned and walked away, leaving the scent of his anger hanging in the air. Thorne's order was a poisoned chalice. Find the leak was a command to fail. He knew, and she knew, that without access to his operational data, she couldn't prove a thing. She couldn't cross-reference timelines, check comms logs, or see which human asset had provided the bad intel. He hadn't given her a mission. He had given her a box with no key. For 6 hours, she stared at her screen, the sundown signal pulsing in its isolated folder. The answer was here, somewhere. To prove the leak, she needed to prove what leaked. She needed Thorne's op plan for the dry hole raid. She walked onto the main talk floor. The operational tempo had slowed to a nervous hush. She stood in front of Thorne's command platform. He was on a secure video call, his back to her, but he knew she was there. He was deliberately ignoring her. "Commander," she said, just loud enough. He held up a hand, silencing her, and continued his call. Elena stood there for a full minute, a statue of professional humiliation. The other analysts on the floor watched, pretending not to. Finally, he muted his call and swiveled in his chair. "Captain." "Sir, to fulfill your order, I need the full op plan for the 2200 Zulu raid. Timestamps, asset codes, and the pre-brief." Thorne looked at her, a flicker of something almost like amusement in his eyes. "My op plans are JSOTF kinetic. They are not for PSYOP review. You're a SIGINT analyst. Analyze the signals. You don't have the clearance for my human assets." It was a perfect bureaucratic wall, the classic information silo. He was walling her off by design. "Commander, how can I find a leak if I don't know what—" "That's your problem, Markova, not mine. You're the one who sees patterns. Find one." He unmuted his call and turned his chair, dismissing her completely. Elena walked back to her closet, her blood ice cold. He wasn't just sidelining her. He was actively obstructing her, setting her up to be the scapegoat for his own bad intel. This was the pivot, her dual-role conflict. She could be loyal to the chain of command, accept Thorne's impossible bad faith order, and fail. Or she could be loyal to the truth, the actual mission, which meant bypassing him entirely. She sat at her terminal and opened a different window, a secure, deep encrypted messaging client linked to the Defense Intelligence Agency. She typed in an old call sign. "Elena, you busy? Badger?" A moment later, a reply. "Badger. Depends. Are you buying the first round next time you're in DC? Elena. "The first 3. I'm in a jam. I'm attached to JSOTF Aegis." Badger. "Ah, playing with the SEALs. How's that working out for your sanity?" Elena. "It's not. Look, I need a ghost. I need the full op plan for their raid last night. 2200 Zulu. It went dry." Badger. Elena. "You're asking me to pull from a JSOC server. That's not just..." Elena. They're compromised. There's a leak. My commander has me in a box and is blaming me for it. I'm trying to do my job, Ben. I'm trying to stop his men from getting shot. The delay was longer this time. Risking her career was one thing. Asking a friend to risk his was another. Badger. It's not your job, Elena, it's his. Just stay in your lane. Elena. What if my lane is the only one that sees the problem? Silence. She was about to close the window, the sickness of defeat settling in, when a data packet notification popped up. No text, just a file. Op Plan 2200 zip. She opened it, her hands flying over the keyboard, cross-referencing the asset codes, the timelines, the GPS routes. She plugged them into her noise database, and the system began to churn. A new message from Badger popped up. Badger. One more thing, my system flagged you. You've been searching for a very specific term. Sundown. Elena's heart skipped. Elena. It's an anomaly I'm tracking. Badger. Don't. It's an old DIA distress protocol, defunct, Cold War era. If you're hearing it, it means something is catastrophically wrong, or it's a trap. Elena. What kind of distress call? Badger. The I'm captured, I'm burned, but I'm still alive kind. Why, Elena? A jolt of pure, cold fear went through her. This wasn't an anomaly. It wasn't a ghost. It was a person. Before she could reply, her own system pinged. The cross-reference complete. Her screen lit up with a timeline that made her blood run cold. She looked at the op plan. The human asset was confirmed at 1400 Zulu. The raid was green-lit at 1500 Zulu. Thorne's final op brief was at 1800 Zulu. She looked at her own SIGINT data. At 1417 Zulu, 17 minutes. After the human asset was confirmed, and hours before the SEALs were briefed, the Alchemist's network had sent a 2-word encrypted message. They're coming. The leak wasn't just internal. It wasn't a SEAL talking in his sleep. The leak was the entire operation. The human source was the trap. Thorne hadn't just hit a dry hole. He had walked his entire team, blind, into the enemy's waiting arms, and they had simply chosen not to spring the trap. They had let him go. She now had the proof, and it was terrifying. Elena stared at the 2 timelines on her screen, the commander's and her own. It was a ticking bomb. She had the proof. She had done exactly what Thorne had ordered her to do, and the answer she'd found was a direct indictment of his own intelligence gathering. Taking this to him would be an execution, her own. He hadn't asked her to find the truth. He had ordered her to find a scapegoat. By succeeding, she had failed his real test. If she presented this, he wouldn't see a solved problem. He would see a threat. He would see the academic PSYOP officer showing him, with data, that his kinetic-first, human-driven approach was compromised. He would bury her. This was the internal conflict. Her duty as a captain was to report this to her commanding officer. But her duty as a soldier was to protect the mission and the men. Thorne, in his current state, was an obstacle to both. She had to break the chain of command. She couldn't go up. She couldn't go to Thorne, so she had to go around. She waited until Euro 300 Zulu, when the TOC was quiet, the night shift crew running on fumes and energy drinks. She left her alcove and walked not toward the command platform, but toward the team room, the inner sanctum of the SEALs. She was looking for one man, Senior Chief Petty Officer Guns. He was the senior enlisted leader, SEL, of the team. In any JSOTF, the SEL was the true center of gravity. He was the repository of the team's institutional knowledge, the one who translated the commander's what into the team's how. He was the one who knew which officers were smart and which were just loud. His loyalty was not to an officer's ego, but to the men he'd trained, bled with, and buried. Elena found him where she expected, in the gear cages, meticulously rechecking a stack of night vision goggles. He was a compact, dense man in his late 40s, his face a roadmap of sun and stress. He heard her approach, the sound of her different army-issue boots on the concrete, and looked up. His eyes were not unkind, but they were exhausted and deeply wary. "Captain," he said, his voice a low gravel. It wasn't a question. "Chief," she replied, stopping a respectful 10 feet away. This was his territory. "Bit late for the intel shop to be walking around, isn't it?" He went back to cleaning a lens, his posture indicating he was giving her exactly 30 seconds. This was the moment. She, a captain, an 03, was about to back-channel her own boss, a commander, an 05, to his top enlisted man. It was a catastrophic breach of protocol. If he was a Thorn loyalist, she'd be packing her bags by 0400. "I'm not here as an intel officer, Chief," she said, her voice low and steady, "and I'm not here to complain about the commander." That got his attention. He stopped cleaning the lens and looked at her fully. "Then why are you here?" "Because your team is walking into traps, and I've found out why. And the commander is not in a position to receive the data right now." Guns said nothing for a long, heavy moment. He simply held her gaze. He was assessing her, not as an officer, but as a person. He was weighing her words against the dry hole 2 nights ago, the rising tension on the talk floor, the commander's black mood. "Show me," he said. He didn't take her to a room. He didn't call anyone. He just looked at the ruggedized tablet she held out. She didn't give him the psychoanalysis. She didn't give him the sundown anomaly. She gave him the one thing he would understand: a timeline. "This is the confirmed human asset report," she said, pointing. 1400 Zulu. "I was in that brief," he said. "This," she said, pulling up her own file, "is an encrypted transmission from the Alchemist's network." 1417 Zulu. The message was 2 words. "They're coming." Guns stared at the screen, his face unreadable. He traced the timestamps with a scarred finger. 17 minutes, Elena said quietly. The asset was a setup. The entire raid was a leak from the second it was conceived. Guns let out a slow, quiet breath. He wasn't angry, like Thorn. He was cold. It was the coldness of a professional who had just seen the flaw in the system. "You're right," he said. "He can't receive this. Not from you. Not right now." Elena felt a sharp, sudden wave of relief. It wasn't vindication. It was understanding. She wasn't crazy. "He sees you as a theorist, Captain," Guns said, handing the tablet back. "He respects his own intel, his guys on the ground. You just showed him his intel is compromised." "So what do I do, Chief?" "He ordered me to find the leak. I found it." "No," Guns said, turning back to his NVGs. "You didn't find the leak. You found a problem. The commander, he doesn't respect problems. He respects action. You've been giving him theory. He wants a target." He looked at her, his eyes sharp. "You're a PSYOP officer. You're an analyst. Use all that." He tapped his own temple. "Use that brain of yours to find him a new target. A better one. One that his bad human can't touch. Find him something he can hit." This was it. The first piece of real respect she'd received. It wasn't agreement. It wasn't friendship. It was a path forward. He wasn't telling her to stand down. He was telling her how to fight in their world. "The next op brief is tomorrow at 1000, Guns said, already dismissing her. The commander will present his new plan. He'll cut me off, Elena said. Yep. Guns snapped a battery pack into place. So don't ask for permission. When he finishes, you just stand up and give your brief. Don't present a problem. Don't talk about leaks. Present a target. Make your intel lead to action. He was telling her to piggyback the brief, to hijack it, in front of the entire team. It was insubordination, plain and simple. You've got 48 hours to find something real, Captain, he said, his back to her. Don't make me regret this conversation. The op brief was at 1000 Zulu. The main TOC briefing room was packed, the air thick with anticipation. This time, Elena wasn't at a side lectern. She was standing at the back, tablet in hand, her heart a cold, heavy drum. Guns was in the front row, his face a granite mask. He gave her one short nod. Present the target. Thorne took the floor. All right, listen up. The dry hole was a setback. The intel was bad. We've scrubbed the human net and have a new high-confidence target. A courier for the alchemist. We hit him, we cut off the cash flow. He pointed to a map. Target will be mobile, in a blue sedan, crossing the Alhambra Bridge at 1400 Zulu. Ghost team will set up a VCP, vehicle checkpoint, to box him in. Standard procedure. Elena looked at her own data. The Alhambra Bridge. It was a known choke point, a perfect place for an ambush. Her sundown signal had been active within 2 clicks of that bridge for the last 3 days. It was a trap. This wasn't just bad intel. It was bait. We hit him hard, we hit him fast, and we are out, Thorne concluded. Questions? Elena's hand didn't go up. She just spoke, her voice cutting through the post-brief chatter. Commander. The room went silent. Thorne turned, his face darkening. Captain, he said, his voice a warning. Sir, that humant is not just bad. It's a trap. She ignored the protocol. She ignored Gunn's advice to just present a target. She had to stop this. The Alhambra Bridge is a kill zone, she said, walking forward, holding up her tablet. My SIGINT shows the enemy network has been hyperactive in that grid, specifically around 1400 Zulu, for the last 72 hours. They aren't using the bridge. They're watching it. They are waiting for us. Thorne looked at her, his jaw tight. You're SIGINT. My human says he's moving. I'm not chasing noise and ghosts, Captain. Sir, I'm telling you, my intel shows. I heard what your intel shows, Thorne snapped, his voice echoing in the small room. It shows patterns. It doesn't show facts. My fact is a man with a name and a car. I am not canceling a kinetic op based on your noise. You are done. Sit down. The finality of the order was absolute. Insubordination was one thing. This was a direct challenge to his command in front of his entire team. She had overplayed her hand. Guns looked away from her, his expression grim. She hadn't just failed, she had embarrassed him. Commander, she tried one last time. Sit down, Markova. That is a direct order. She froze, the humiliation burning her face. She took a step back and returned to her dark alcove, her defeat total. At 1345 Zulu, the Tioka ops light went red. Ghost team was moving. Elena sat at her station, her headset on, her screen split. On one, the drone feed showed the VCP. On the other, her SIGINT feed showed the noise around the Alhambra Bridge. It was silent. Too silent. The normal civilian comms were dead. This was the true agony of the talk. It was the dynamics of a watcher, a god with no hands. She was about to watch a train wreck she had predicted, completely powerless to stop it. Her dual-role conflict was a nightmare. Her duty as an officer was to obey Thorne's order to stand down, but her duty as an analyst, as a person, was screaming at her to do something, anything, to yank the comms cable, to pull the fire alarm. She knew, with a sickening, absolute certainty, she knew it was a trap. Aegis Actual, the ground team leader's voice came over the net. VCP is set. No sign of target vehicle yet. Wait, we have eyes. Blue sedan, matching description, approaching the checkpoint. Elena watched the car on the thermal feed. It moved too slowly. Ghost 1, hold him at the barrier, Thorne ordered from his command chair, 20 feet behind her. The car stopped. The SEALs moved in, weapons up. Actual, the team leader said, his voice suddenly tight. There's no one in the car. Elena's blood went cold. It's a bomb, she whispered, a second before the team leader yelled it. It's a VBI'd! All call signs! Move! Move! The comms net exploded in a wall of white noise. The drone feed became a static-filled screen of white-hot fire as the car detonated. The shockwave visibly rattled the camera. When the feed cleared, the scene was chaos. Black smoke, fire, and the high, thin sound of ruined comms. Ghost 1, talk to me! Thorne was yelling, his voice raw. Ambush! 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 The voice was a scream. RPG fire! From the overpass! We're pinned! We're pinned! Heavy machine gun fire crackled over the net, an overwhelming wall of sound. Actual, this is Ghost 2! Another voice yelled. Ghost 1 is down! He's down! He's not moving! Man down! The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She felt the bile rise in her throat. This was it. This was the cost of Thorne's arrogance. This was the price of her own failure to be heard. This was exactly what she had tried to prevent, and her intel, her patterns, her useless noise, had done nothing to stop the blood. She looked at her screen, at the red icons of her team, trapped. Actual, the team's new leader, Guns, was on the net. We are compromised. We are taking effective fire from all sides. They're hurting us. I need an exfil route. I need it now. I need an exfil route. Now! Guns' voice was strained over the net, punctuated by the snap hiss of rounds passing close to his mic. Chaos erupted on the TOC floor. Thorne was on his feet, yelling at the drone operator. Where is the fire coming from? Give me the overpass. I want air support. Get me a gunship, now! The air support coordinator was already screaming into his own headset. Stand by for 9 line. Stand by. Elena watched her own screens, her stomach a cold knot. This was the kinetic solution, rain fire from the sky. But the drone feed showed the overpass was a ghost. The RPGs had been fired, and the shooters had vanished. The machine gun fire was coming from a dozen windows in the surrounding apartment blocks. It was a 360-degree ambush. They're hurting us! Guns panted, the sound of his breathing heavy and ragged. All exfil routes north are zeroed. They're pushing us into the square. Thorne slammed his fist on the console. Gunship is 10 minutes out. Ghost team, hold your position. We won't last 10 minutes. Guns roared back. This was the conflict. The TOC was screaming for a soldier solution, airstrikes. But Elena's analyst brain knew that was what the enemy wanted. They were forcing the SEALs into a static position, a perfect target for a follow-on attack, perhaps a mortar team already ranged in. She had to block it all out. The shouting, the panic, the image of the man down. Her hands flew over her console, not the map, not the drone feed, but her SIGINT kit. She killed the audio feed from Ghost Team, filtering out the sound of their dying. She needed to listen. She slammed a filter onto her noise feed, cutting out all high-band digital comms. She was looking for the low-tech, the old-school, low-band VHF, the analog walkie-talkies the spotters would be using. They were too close to use cell phones. The signals would be jammed or tracked. They needed something simple. Her screen filled with static. She spun a virtual dial, hunting through the frequencies. Shh! Move! Ksh! Pinned? It was a mess. She couldn't get a lock. She closed her eyes, ignoring the chaos of the talk, and just listened to the static, to the rhythm of the noise. There. A single voice, clear, calm, and speaking the local dialect. Not yelling, not panicked. He was directing. He was giving coordinates. Fire on the alley, the south alley. Push them north. Yes, into the square. Wait for the gunship. Elena's eyes snapped open. He said, gunship. He knew their tactics. He was waiting for the airstrike. She initiated a direction find. The signal was strong, too strong. The line on her map wasn't pointing to the overpass. It wasn't pointing to any of the apartment buildings. It was pointing to a patch of empty street right in the middle of the firefight, not 20 meters from Gunn's position. That's impossible, she whispered. She reran the DF. The result was the same. The signal was coming from under them. The spotter, she realized, her blood turning to ice. She pulled up the city schematic, a sewer conduit, an old concrete storm drain. He wasn't in a building. He was in a concrete bunker, subterranean, under the street. He was untouchable, with a periscope or a pinhole camera, and he was orchestrating the entire kill zone. Thorne was screaming about the 9 line. Guns was reporting another man hit. Elena ripped her headset jack from her noise console and plugged it into the main command net. She hit the override button, silencing the entire TOS. Aegis Actual, this is Markova, she yelled, her voice shocking the room into silence. Break, break, Ghost Team, do not hold position, do not move north, break contact, south. I repeat, break south, now. Captain, you are not. Thorne started, his voice a low thunder. The spotter is subterranean, she shouted, cutting him off, giving a tactical order to a SEAL commander. He's in the sewer conduit under the street, 20 meters from your position. He's hurting you. He's waiting for the gunship. You are standing on top of him. Break south. For a second, there was nothing. A single agonizing beat of dead air. The entire operation, the lives of the team, the very fabric of the chain of command, hung in that 1 second of silence. Elena had just committed a court-martialable offense. Then, Gunn's voice, hard as iron. Move south, throwing frags! The sound of explosions, grenades, and renewed, desperate gunfire filled the net. Thorne stared at Elena, his face pale, his expression unreadable. He was too stunned to be angry. He had just watched a PSYOP analyst, the non-sniper from the intel shop, take command of his team. Elena held her breath, her hand shaking so hard she couldn't unplug her headset. The comms net was chaos for another 3 minutes. Then, Guns. Voice cut through again, breathless. Actual, we're clear. We're in the south alley. We're out of the kill box, but we have 2 wounded, 1 critical. We need that exfil. Thorne seemed to snap back. He turned from Elena and grabbed his own mic, his voice a strained, robotic monotone. Copy, Ghost. Exfil is rerouted. Stand by. Elena sank into her chair, the adrenaline leaving her so fast her vision swam. The team was alive. They had escaped. 2 men were wounded, but they were alive, and she had done it. She hadn't fired a shot, but she had saved them. The medevac helicopter's rotors faded into the pre-dawn light, leaving a vacuum of silence in the toge. The ops light was green. The battle was over, but the war in the room had just begun. 2 men were in surgery. One, the team leader Ghost 1, was critical. The VBIED's shrapnel had torn through his side. The other had shrapnel in his leg. They would both live, but Ghost 1's career as an operator was over. Elena felt the news like a physical weight. This wasn't a victory. Her being right had a cost, measured in pints of blood and shattered careers. The small, ugly flicker of vindication she'd felt after the dry hole was gone, replaced by a dull, aching empathy. She had watched Thorne's failure, and now she was watching the consequences. The after-action review was called for 0700 Zulu, the same briefing room. This time, the mood was not anticipatory. It was funereal. Thorne walked in last. He looked like hell. His uniform was still streaked with dirt from where he'd thrown himself to the floor during the ambush. There was a fresh, raw scrape along his jaw. He didn't sit in his usual spot, but stood at the head of the table, his eyes sweeping the room. Guns was there. His arm in a sling from a piece of shrapnel, his face a mask of controlled fury. The other SEALs looked hollow, and then there was Elena. She wasn't in her alcove. Per regulation, she was at the main table, her tablet in front of her. She was no longer the noise analyst. She was a participant in the failure. The AAR, Thorne began, his voice a low rasp, is now in session. One rule, brutal honesty. We failed. The debrief will identify how we failed, not who. The lie was so thick Elena could taste it. This entire meeting was about who. For an hour they went through it. Timestamps, decisions. Guns gave a flat, monotone description of the VBIED, the kill zone, the subterranean spotter. The intel, Guns said, his eyes on the table, was a trap. The human was bait. Thorne nodded, his face unreadable. The intel was my call. I greenlit it. He looked around the room. Who else? A comms tech, the same one who had given Elena her bandwidth, spoke up. Sir, the comms blackout after the VBIED? That was a secondary device, a wide band jammer. They knew our comms procedures. They knew everything, Guns said, his voice dropping. They knew the VCP plan. They knew we'd call for air. They were waiting for us. The room went silent. The who was Thorne. His intel, his plan, his arrogance. Thorne stared at the blank screen at the front of the room. He was a man trapped. He could end the AIR, take the blame, and continue his war of attrition, both with the alchemist and with Elena. Or he could do the one thing his ego and training rebelled against. He could pivot. He could admit his entire methodology was wrong. Elena watched him. She felt no satisfaction. She just felt an overwhelming, bone-deep exhaustion. She saw the cost of his being wrong, and it was devastating. Thorne finally turned, his gaze landing, as it had to, on her. He had to face the fact that she was right. Captain Markova, he said. The entire room tensed. Sir, she replied, you said it was a trap. You said the SIGINT showed they were watching the bridge. You tried to warn me. Yes, sir. And when we were in the kill zone, he continued, his voice flat, you identified the spotter. My SIGINT did, sir. No, Thorne said, shaking his head slightly. Your SIGINT didn't. You did. You overrode my command net and gave a tactical order to my team. Elena's stomach dropped. This was it. He was going to court-martial her. An order, Thorne said, looking at guns, that saved your life, that saved all your lives. The stunned silence in the room was a physical thing. The SEALs were staring at their commander. He wasn't just admitting fault, he was validating her, the non-sniper, the academic. Thorne turned back to Elena. He didn't apologize. Apology wasn't in his vocabulary. Instead, he gave her something more valuable, a public concession. Markova's intel was correct, he said to the entire room, his voice hard as steel. My human is compromised. The leak is real. We've been hunting the wrong man. We've been hunting a ghost. We've been hunting his way. He looked at Elena, the raw scrape on his jaw stark. He wasn't just bruised physically. His entire professional identity had been shattered. From now on, Thorne said, his voice a command that brokered no argument. We hunt her way. The shift was palpable. We hunt her way was not just a phrase. It was a tectonic change in the operational landscape of the JSOTF. When Elena arrived at the talk the next morning, her closet station was gone. Her equipment had been moved to the main command platform, to a primary intel fusion station right next to the senior analyst. The same comms tech who had once dismissed her was now running a dedicated high-bandwidth fiber line to her terminal. Whatever you need, Captain, he'd said, not meeting her eye. You get priority. She now had the authority. She had the resources, and she had the full, terrifying attention of Commander Thorne, who watched her from his chair, waiting. She had promised a new way, and now she had to deliver. She focused everything on the one thread she trusted, sundown. I want a full-spectrum hunt for this signal, she told the SIGINT team, the authority in her own voice surprising her. I want every receiver we have, from the ground stations to the airborne assets, looking for this frequency. The moment it appears, I want a multi-point DF. For the first 24 hours, there was nothing, just silence. The sundown signal missed its 0217 and 1417 Zulu windows. Elena felt a cold dread creeping in. Had she been wrong? Had the ambush scared them off? Still chasing your ghost, Captain? Thorne asked, his voice low, not unkind, but heavy with the weight of his waiting. It's not a ghost, sir. It's a professional. He's changed his pattern because of our last engagement. It was a guess, but it felt right. Then, at 1903 Zulu, a completely new time, the signal lit up. Got it! The comms tech yelled. It's on, strong, but it's moving, fast. Seems to be vehicle mounted. Triangulate, Elena ordered. The map lit up. A red circle appeared, 20 clicks north, on a main highway. DF is solid, the tech said, but the signal is gone. It was up for less than 90 seconds. Elena stared at the red circle. A ghost. A moving, sporadic, intelligent ghost. This was her internal conflict, the war between her two specialties. The PSYOP officer in her, the psychologist, wanted to communicate. The signal was a cry for help. Her instinct was to send a message back on the same frequency. A ping, an acknowledgement, a sign that someone was listening. But the SIGINT analyst in her knew that was a death sentence. If she pinged the signal, the enemy monitoring it would know. Not just that the asset was compromised, but that they were being watched. They would kill the asset and vanish. She couldn't be a psychologist. She had to be an archaeologist. She had to find the pattern. For the next 3 days, she did just that. She collected the sporadic pings, a 90-second burst here, a 3-minute transmission there. She mapped the direction find coordinates. The signal was a ghost, and she was mapping its haunt. If this was a dead end, She would lose everything. The trust she'd just earned from Thorne, the nascent respect from Guns, her own professional credibility. It would all evaporate. The sundown asset was her only path to the real alchemist. On the fourth day, she had 6 red circles on her map. They looked random, scattered across the province. "It's meaningless," she whispered, her frustration mounting. "He's just wandering." "No," Thorne said, his voice quiet. He had walked up behind her and was staring at her screen. "He's not wandering. Look." He pointed to the screen, to her 6 red circles. "This first one, Highway 4, that's near the Dry Hole safe house." Elena's blood went cold. "This second one," he continued, pointing, "that's 2 clicks from the Alhambra Bridge, where we were hit." Elena's hands flew across the keyboard. She pulled up the master file of Thorne's old intel, the compromised Humant, all the targets he had ever chased. She laid his map, his alchemist locations, over her sundown map. They weren't just close. They were a match. The Dry Hole? Sundown was there 2 days before the raid. The Alhambra Bridge? Sundown was there the day before the ambush. Every alchemist safe house Thorne had been fed. Sundown had been there first. It was a sickening, horrifying realization. They weren't 2 targets. They were the same target, just seen at different times. Her ghost and his alchemist were the same person, but Sundown was a DIA distress call. "He's not a ghost," Elena said, the words catching in her throat as the implication hit her. "He's not moving himself. He's a prisoner." She looked at Thorne, the horror of the situation dawning on both of them. "Commander," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "they're not just compromised. They're using him. They're dragging our asset from safe house to safe house, using him as bait to set traps for us." She stood up, her entire focus now on Thorne. "I think your HVT is our asset." The Sundown connection changed the mission from a hunt to a recovery, and with it, shifted the full weight of Thorne's anger from Elena to a new target. The bureaucracy that had let this happen. He didn't make a call. He went in person. The DIA station was housed in the U.S. Embassy compound, a sterile beige fortress. Elena went with him, not as his analyst, but as his witness. She carried the tablet with the sundown logs. They were met by the station chief, a man named Pritchard, who looked more like a mid-level accounting executive than a spy. He wore a perfectly pressed suit, offered them lukewarm coffee, and sat behind a large, clean mahogany desk. "Commander," Pritchard said, smiling a thin, political smile. "It's always a pleasure to support JSOTWF, but this is highly irregular. Your secure VTC would have been sufficient." "This isn't a VTC conversation," Thorne said. He didn't sit. He stood in the middle of the room, radiating an energy that made the expensive rug look cheap. "I have a SIGINT analyst," he nodded to Elena, "who has been tracking a ghost that uses one of your old protocols. Sundown." Pritchard's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went flat. It was a look Elena recognized, the bureaucratic Stonewall. "Commander, that protocol is defunct. It's a Cold War relic. If your analyst is hearing it, it's noise, just as you'd suspect. Insurgents spoof old signals all the time." "My analyst," Thorne said, his voice dangerously quiet, "is the only reason my team isn't in body bags right now. Her noise is the only clean intel I've got. The signal is coming from DIA asset Agent Kale." Pritchard's mask slipped, just a fraction. He looked at Elena, his gaze sharp and appraising. "Agent Kale is dead, Commander. He was declared KIA 6 months ago. His file is closed. His file is not closed, Elena spoke, her voice clear and precise. Agent Kale is not dead. He is being used by the Alchemists' network as live bait, moved from safe house to set traps for your task force. Pritchard turned his full attention to her. Captain, Markova, is it? You're PSYOP, correct? You've built a narrative, a pattern. It's compelling, but it's not fact. The fact is, Kale is dead. The Sundown Protocol is defunct. That's the agency's official position. Thorne felt a jolt of pure, unadulterated frustration. It was the exact same feeling he'd had in the briefing room, listening to Elena's academic brief. It was the frustration of a man of action, trapped in a room with people who only talked. The irony was so thick he could taste it. He was now the one fighting the bureaucracy, and he was using the very intel he had once dismissed as noise. He was arguing for the academic. He finally understood the rage Elena must have felt. Your official position, Thorne said, taking a step toward the desk. Got 2 of my men sent home. One of them will never walk right again. One of them will never operate again. Commander, this is not... Thorne slammed his hand on the mahogany desk. The coffee cups rattled. Pritchard flinched. My men, Thorne snarled, were shot because of your defunct protocol, because your dead asset is being used as a lure. I don't care about your official position. You will open Kale's file. You will tell me what he was working on. You will tell me now. The silence in the room was absolute. This was no longer an interagency meeting. It was an interrogation. Elena watched, silent. Thorne wasn't just using her intel. He was fighting for it. He was waging war on her behalf, on Kale's behalf. Pritchard looked at Thorne's face, a mask of controlled fury, and he saw a man who would not leave. He saw a man who would burn down the entire embassy to get his answer. The DIA could hide from Congress. It could not hide from a JSOC commander who had just lost men. Pritchard's shoulders slumped. He cracked. He swiveled to his terminal and typed in a password. You're burning me, Commander. You know that. The fire is already burning, Thorne said. Kale wasn't the alchemist, Pritchard said, his voice a low monotone as he read from the newly opened file. He was hunting him. The alchemist isn't a person, it's a network. Kale was trying to extract the network's chief chemist, the real alchemist. He got in too deep. He went dark, Elena said, stating, not asking. He went dark 6 months ago, Pritchard confirmed, his face pale. The mission was scrubbed. We wrote him off. We couldn't risk the entire regional network for one compromised asset. We listed him as dead and sealed the file. Thorne stared at him, the disgust on his face profound. The DIA hadn't just lost an asset. They had burned him. They had left him to be captured, tortured, and used, all to protect their network. Get me that file, Thorne ordered. Commander, I can't just... You will, Thorne said. Or I'll have the JSOTF general call your director. Your choice. Pritchard began the file transfer. Thorne and Elena walked out of the embassy, back into the hot, dusty air, the silence between them heavy. So, Elena said quietly, as they got into their vehicle. Now we're hunting a ghost and fighting our own side. Thorne looked at her, the first hint of a grim smile touching his lips. Welcome to the war, Captain. Now, let's go get our asset back. We can't just send him a text, Elena said, her voice tight. The command platform had become their shared territory. The US versus them dynamic of the Teok had evaporated, replaced by a singular, obsessive focus. Thorne, Elena, and Guns were huddled around her station, studying Cale's DIA file. The file says he was a classicist, Elena pointed out, highlighting a line in Cale's profile. Recruited out of Yale, specialized in dead languages, he designed the Sundown Protocol himself, based on a Cold War numbers station. So he's smart, Thorne said, pacing, which means his captors know he's smart. Whatever he's broadcasting, they're listening. We signal him, they kill him. Exactly, Elena said. We can't signal him, we have to signal them, and we have to design a message that Cale will understand, but the alchemist will misinterpret. This was her world now. Not SIGINT, but pure psyop. She wasn't just an analyst, she was bait. She had to design a lure that only her specific high-value fish would recognize. The alchemist's network thinks they're feeding us bad human, she reasoned, her mind racing. They expect us to be looking for a new source, so we give them one. What are you thinking, Captain? Thorne asked, his respect for her now a given. We use a message in the clear, Elena said. We'll piggyback on the local civilian weather broadcast. We buy 30 seconds of airtime, pretending it's a public service announcement about a coming sandstorm. We'll embed a numbers message inside it. A numbers station? Guns asked, skeptical. It's a classic spycraft, Elena explained. A voice reads a string of numbers. To the enemy, it looks like just another regional insurgent group communicating. It's noise, just like they are. But to Cale... She looked at Cale's file. His Sundown Protocol was based on the call sign of his college radio station, and the frequency was a reference to the Aeneid. This man is an academic. He's not waiting for a 9-line. He's waiting for a riddle. So what's the riddle? Thorne asked. The alchemist's network is arrogant. They believe they are controlling our hunt. The message we send can't be a rescue signal. It has to look like a buy. It has to sound like a new alchemist is trying to take over the old one's territory. She grabbed a notepad. We broadcast a string of numbers. The first set will be the buy-in, a fake price for a fake weapons shipment. The alchemist's network will hear this and think a new player is in town. They'll be confused. They'll want to know who it is. But Cale will ignore the first set. He'll be waiting for the second set of numbers. The Aeneid reference. A line and word count from the book. That part of the message will simply be, we know. We are coming. Name the time. The stakes were astronomical. If Cale was dead, the broadcast was just static, a failed trap. But if he was alive, and his captors deciphered the real message, the Aeneid part, they would know he was still communicating. They would execute him on the spot. Elena was holding a man's life in her hands, and her only weapon was a dead language. Thorne looked at the plan, then at Elena. You're betting his life on a college textbook. I'm betting his life on the fact that he's smarter than his captors, she replied. It took 6 hours to get the broadcast ready. Elena recorded the numbers herself, her voice digitally altered to a flat, female monotone. At 2100 Zulu, the message went out over the state-run weather channel. The silence that followed was the loudest sound Elena had ever heard. They waited. The talk was a tomb. Every analyst, every tech, even Thorne, just stared at Elena's SIGINT feed, at the blank space where the sundown signal should be. 1 hour passed. Nothing. 2 hours. The air in the talk was turning sour. Thorne was drinking coffee, his leg jigging with a nervous energy she'd never seen from him. 3 hours. Elena felt sick. She had done it. She had misinterpreted. She had gotten him killed. Her academic solution had just been another form of arrogance. "Captain," Thorne said, his voice low. "It's 0200. The window is—" "Wait," Guns said, pointing at the screen. The sundown signal lit up. It wasn't faint. It wasn't sporadic. It was a single, hard, unencrypted burst, fired from a new location, deep in the urban center. "Got it!" the comms tech yelled. "DF is solid!" The signal was just a string of numbers. Elena's hands flew over the keyboard. "It's not a message. It's a grid coordinate." She plugged the numbers into the map. A red dot appeared, lighting up a single building in the center of the city's largest, most crowded open-air market. Thorne stared at the map, his face hardening. "He's not asking for a rescue," Thorne said, his voice a low growl. "He's calling a meeting, and he's chosen a place we can't fight." "A market," Thorne said, his voice a low, disgusted growl. He was staring at the satellite image on the main screen. "He picked an open-air market at 1000 Zulu. The place will be packed." "He's not just calling a meeting, sir," Elena said, her own voice tight. "He's chosen the armor. Civilian armor. He knows we can't move." The talk was a hive of frantic, controlled energy. This was no longer a hunt. It was a hostage negotiation, and the hostage hadn't even shown up yet. Thorne was faced with an impossible choice. His internal conflict was a war between the soldier and the commander. The soldier in him, the operator, knew this was a trap. The rules were simple. You don't go into a kill zone you can't control. But the commander in him had to weigh the options. This was their only chance. Kyle was their only link to the real alchemist. If they let this window close, Kale would be executed, and the alchemist network would vanish, taking their wounded pride and their burned asset with them. He had to put his men in an unsecured, civilian-dense area. "Rules of engagement," Thorne said, his voice flat, speaking to the room. "The market is a designated no-fire zone. That means no one, and I mean no one, fires a single shot. Clear PID and zero risk of collateral damage. That's the standard. We are observe and report only." "Guns." The senior chief, his arm still in a sling, stepped forward. "Sir, observe and report is fine, but they know we're coming. This is Kale's buy-in. It's an exchange. He's showing his captors the new alchemist you invented, Captain." He nodded to Elena. "He's right," Thorne said. "This isn't a rescue. It's a trade. We're the buyers." He looked at Elena. "Your SSIOP created a new player. Now that player has to show up. You're coming with me." Elena's blood ran cold. "Sir?" "Not you," Guns said, stepping in. "It's too hot. We'll put 2 men on the ground, low-vis, in civvies. They'll be the buyers. The rest of the team, including me, will be on overwatch, running sniper spotter teams from the rooftops. We'll have eyes, but our hands are tied. No one fires. No one." This was the new ROE. The dilemma was perfect. They had to be present to observe, but they were forbidden to engage. They were to be witnesses, not soldiers. At 0945 Zulu, Elena was in the TOC, her noise station now the nerve center of the entire operation. Thorne was beside her, his command post now a chair next to her keyboard. The drone feed was live, showing the market. A sprawling, chaotic mass of canvas stalls, shouting vendors, and thousands of civilians. Ghost 3 and 4 are on the ground. Guns reported over the comms net. His voice was calm, coming from a rooftop position 300 meters north of the target building. "They're in position." "I see them," Elena murmured, tracking their covert beacons. "No sign of Kale," Thorne said, his eyes glued to the feed. The tension was unbearable. They were waiting for a ghost to walk into a crowd, knowing he was bait for a trap they couldn't disarm. The stakes were absolute. A single stray bullet would mean civilian casualties, a strategic failure, and the end of their operation. At 1002 Zulu, Guns spoke. "Movement, black sedan. 3 men, hard vis, getting out. They're moving to the cafe." "I see them," Elena said, her own console flashing as it intercepted a burst of comms. "They're the real Alchemists Network. They're the sellers." "Where is Kale?" Thorne growled. "Wait," Guns said. "We have a second vehicle, a van, pulling up to the back of the cafe. They're pulling someone out." The drone's camera zoomed, a high-fidelity image that was still frustratingly blurred by the market's heat. A man, gaunt, bearded, in a dirty tracksuit, was pushed from the van. "Is that him?" Thorne demanded. "It's him," Elena said, her voice shaking. "It's Kale. Face rec is a 90% match." Kyle was pushed into a chair at the cafe, surrounded by the Alchemist's men, the sellers. Then, the buyers, the 3 men from the black sedan, sat down opposite him. "What is this?" Thorne whispered, his mind racing. Elena watched the body language, her PSYOP training kicking in. Kyle wasn't the bait. He was the product. "Oh my God," she said, a wave of nausea hitting her. "Sir, this isn't a meeting. It's an auction. The Alchemists Network. They're selling him." Thorne's face went white. He realized it instantly. The DIA asset hadn't just been captured. He'd been compromised, used as bait. And now that his bait value was gone, he was being sold to the highest bidder. A rival faction, the men from the sedan. "He wasn't being traded," Thorne said, his voice full of a sudden cold fury. "He was being processed." "Guns," Thorne's voice was low. "We have a new problem. This is a handoff. Kale is being sold." "I copy, Actual," Guns said. "But the ROE stands. We are no fire. We can't engage." "They're putting him in the sedan," Elena said, watching the feed. "They're leaving. Sir, they are leaving." Kyle was being led to the black sedan. The exchange was over. "Do not," Thorne said, his voice a razor's edge. "Let him leave. Ghost 3, 4, create a distraction. Now." "Sir, that's a fire command," Guns yelled. "It's a distraction," Thorne roared back. On the drone feed, 2 small explosions, like firecrackers, went off near the sedan. The 2 low-vis seals. It was all the chaos the scene needed. The Alchemist's men, thinking it was an attack, drew weapons. The buyers drew their weapons. "Shots fired! Shots fired!" Guns screamed. A firefight erupted in the middle of the crowded market. Civilians screamed and ran. It was a complete disaster. Elena watched in horror. Kale, in the middle of the chaos, was grabbed, not by the seals, but by the sellers, the Alchemist's men, who still had him, and bundled back into the original van. "They've got him!" Elena yelled. "The van! It's moving! Westbound!" "We've lost him," Thorne said, slamming his hand on the console, his face a mask of fury and defeat. "We lost him! We lost him!" Thorne's voice was a low-frequency growl that vibrated through the TOC. He wasn't speaking to anyone. He was just stating a fact, a jagged, unacceptable fact. Elena watched the drone feed, her stomach a hollow pit. The white van carrying Kyle had disappeared into the maze of the city's western district, a warren of narrow streets the drone couldn't track. The failure was absolute. Her PSYOP, her academic trap, had not only failed to secure the asset, but it had also initiated a catastrophic firefight in a civilian area. She had forced Kyle into the open, and he had been swallowed whole. "Sir," the comms tech said, his voice hesitant, I'm getting something new." "What?" Thorne snapped, rounding on him. "A new signal. DIA standard distress beacon. It's Agent Kale's. His real one." "It's a man-down beacon," Elena said, her blood running cold. She recognized the protocol. This wasn't a sundown riddle. This was a scream. This was the "I am compromised and about to be executed" beacon. "Get me a grid," Thorne ordered. "It's not moving," the tech said, his hands flying. "It's static. He's activated his imminent danger protocol. I have the building. A warehouse, industrial district, 5 clicks west." The mood in the talk shifted from defeat to a cold, predatory focus. This was it. Kale had given them the final location. "Ghost team," Thorne was on the net, his voice pure ice. "Saddle up. We are moving in 5. This is a full-force assault. We hunt." Elena felt a profound, crushing wave of guilt. This was her fault. Her intricate plan, her message in the clear, her bet on a college textbook. It had all blown up. The firefight in the market was her doing. And now Kale was about to be executed because he had trusted her signal, and she had failed to protect him. This was no longer an intel op. It was a race against time. The warehouse was a 5-story concrete box surrounded by a high fence. Thorne, Guns, and the rest of the Ghost team were on the roof of an adjacent building, setting up their sniper and overwatch positions. Thorne himself was on the sniper rifle's spotting scope, his voice a low growl in Elena's ear as she sat in the tow sea, a helpless spectator 5,000 kilometers away, yet intimately connected to his optics. "I have the beacon's location," Thorne said. "3rd floor, but I have no eyes inside. The windows are tinted. I have 0 PID. PID, positive identification, the key military detail. They had the building, but they didn't know which room held Kale. They didn't know which room held the real alchemist." "Sir," Elena said, her voice tight, "the beacon is Kale's. The mission is rescue." "The mission," Thorne said, his voice flat, "is to neutralize the alchemist. Kale is a secondary objective. If I get a clean shot, I'm taking it. We can't risk another escape." Elena's stomach dropped. The emotional consequence was devastating. Thorne's priority had shifted. He had been burned by the rescue mission in the market. He was reverting to his original creed, assassination. He was here to salvage the mission, and if that meant sacrificing Kale, so be it. The tension was a physical thing. She could hear Thorne's breathing over the net. She could hear the click as the sniper, call sign Eagle 1, chambered around. "Eagle 1, this is Aegis Actual," Thorne said. "I'm on the glass. The second I have PID on the Alchemist or any HVT, you are cleared to engage." "Copy, Actual," the sniper replied. "Standing by." "I have movement," Thorne said, his voice dropping. "3rd floor, north window. The tint is... it's scratched. I can see inside." Elena held her breath. This was it. The climax of the cold open. But this time she was living it in real time, knowing the stakes. "I see 2 individuals. One is tied to a chair. That's Kale. I have PID on Kale." "Sir," Elena whispered. "The second individual," Thorne said, his voice tightening, "is standing over him. Matches the description of the buyer from the market. This is him. This is the alchemist." "Sir, wait." "He's holding a pistol," Thorne said, his voice a low, urgent hiss. "He's preparing to execute Kale. He's raising the pistol to his head." This was the impossible choice. Thorn had a clean shot. He could take out the alchemist, but he might also hit Kale. Or he could wait, and Kale would be executed. Eagle 1, Thorn said, his voice strained. I have PID on the HVT, the alchemist. You have the shot. Window, third from the left. Copy, sir, the sniper said. I have him. Elena's entire world narrowed to the sound of the sniper's breathing. Eagle 1, Thorn commanded. You are cleared. Take the shot. Eagle 1, Thorn commanded. You are cleared. Take the shot. Time, which had been moving at the speed of adrenaline, suddenly fractured. For Elena, 5,000 kilometers away in the Tow Sea, that sentence was not a sound. It was a physical event, a shockwave that traveled through the fiber optic line and struck her in the chest. On her noise feed, on the separate, isolated frequency she was monitoring, the one she hadn't told anyone about, her private line into the sundown signal, a new waveform spiked. It wasn't Kale. It was the other man. The one Thorn had identified as the alchemist, the one holding the pistol. He spoke. One word in a dialect she barely recognized, a low, guttural whisper to his captive. Sundown. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an order. It was a question, a password. He was testing Kyle. In that nanosecond, the entire horrifying puzzle snapped into place. The man with the pistol wasn't the alchemist. The man in the chair wasn't Kale. No, that was wrong. The man in the chair was Kale. The man with the pistol. He's not your target, Elena screamed, the words tearing out of her throat. She didn't just break protocol. She vaporized it. She hit the command net override, silencing every other station, her voice suddenly the only sound in the ears of Thorn, the sniper, and the entire Ghost team. Wait! Her shriek, high and female and utterly unprofessional, was a bomb in the middle of the kinetic net. Captain, you are not on this net! Thorn's voice was a razor, a sound of pure, murderous fury. He was mid-breath, his finger still metaphorically on the trigger. Stay. Out. Sir, the HVT is not your target, she yelled, her voice breaking. She was pleading, arguing, and commanding all at once. The man with the gun just said the activation phrase for sundown. Silence. It was the silence of the cold open. The digital hiss of an open channel. Thorn froze. His entire body, poised over the spotting scope on that dusty rooftop, went rigid. His breath, which he had been about to exhale, caught in his chest. Sundown. The word hung in the air, a ghost. It wasn't a target. It was a distress call. The taunt from 6 months ago. You're not a sniper, ma'am, flashed, unbidden, through his mind. He looked through his scope. He saw the man with the pistol. He saw the man in the chair. He had given the order to kill the man with the pistol. But Elena's shot was different. Her shot was information. It had crossed 5,000 kilometers in a fraction of a second and had just, in effect, hit the sniper's rifle, knocking it off target. He realized the horrifying truth, the one she had seen and he had not. The alchemist, holding the pistol, was Kale. The man in the chair was a decoy, a prisoner, perhaps the real alchemist. Kale had been forced to turn, to execute his own target, and his single word, sundown, was not a password, but a desperate last-second plea for extraction, a final "I am here" before he was forced to pull the trigger. Thorn was about to order his sniper to kill the very asset he was here to save. Eagle 1, Thorn's voice was unrecognizable. It was a choked, strangled sound, the voice of a man who had just looked into the abyss. Hold! Hold your fire! He ripped his eye from the scope. his heart hammering with an adrenaline he had never known, not of a hunt, but of a near miss. Eagle 1, disengage. Do not fire. He got on the main net, his voice shaking, not with fear, but with the force of the realization. All call signs, he bellowed, his voice cracking. All call signs, this is Aegis Actual. The mission has changed. The HVT, the man with the pistol, is the asset. I say again, the man with the pistol is the asset. He looked at the warehouse, a new, terrible understanding dawning. Mission is now rescue. Mission is now rescue. Thorne's words, cracked and raw over the net, were a detonation. The ghost team, trained for surgical violence, pivoted to a new kind of war. It was no longer an assassination, it was an extraction. The assault, when it came, was not a sniper's shot, but a symphony of controlled chaos. They breached the warehouse from 3 directions, a flood of night vision green operators. Elena, back in the Tau Sea, had her hands off the comms, listening to the feed, a helpless passenger once more. She heard guns yelling, "Asset is the shooter! I repeat, Asset is the shooter! Do not engage! Do not engage!" She heard the return fire from the other men in the room, Kale's captors. And then, Thorne's voice, not from the rooftop, but from inside the building. He had left his sniper perch and joined the assault. "Kale! D.A. Kale! Aegis! We are Aegis! Drop your weapon!" A single pistol shot, then silence. Elena's heart stopped. "Man down!" Guns yelled. "HVT is down! We have the asset! Kale is secure! I repeat, asset is secure!" Thorne's voice, breathless. The other one, the one in the chair, he's the one who's hit. He's the target. Bag him. He's the real alchemist. Kale, forced to execute his own target, had fired his pistol not at the prisoner, but at the wall, a final act of defiance, just as the team breached. The alchemist, tied to the chair, had been hit in the crossfire. It was over. The final AAR was held 48 hours later, not in the toques, but in the embassy's secure skiff. The air was cold, the lighting fluorescent and unforgiving. It wasn't a debrief, it was an inquest. At the table were a 2-star general from JSOC, the DIA's Pritchard, his face a mask of bureaucratic fury, Commander Thorne, and Captain Elena Markova. "Let's be clear about what this was," Pritchard began, his voice slick. "A complete breakdown of interagency protocol culminating in a firefight in a civilian market and an unauthorized operation that—" "A breakdown?" Thorne cut him off, his voice quiet, but lethal. "Your agency listed a living asset as dead and left him as bait for 6 months. That is the breakdown. We went in and cleaned up your mess. Your cleaning nearly started a war in that market, Commander." Pritchard shot back. "You violated ROE. You fired on—" "My men used non-lethal distractions per my order," Thorne said, his eyes drilling into Pritchard. "An order given to prevent your asset, who you abandoned, from being sold to a rival faction while your agency sat on its hands and sealed his file." The general held up a hand. "Enough. Both of you." He turned his gaze to Elena. "Captain Markova, you're the centerpiece of this whole thing. You're a PSYOP officer who was, I'm told, ordered to monitor noise. Instead, you tracked a defunct DIA signal against the advice of your superiors. You bypassed your commander to conduct your own interagency investigation, and you personally countermanded a kill order from a SEAL commander in the middle of a live op." He leaned forward. "Explain yourself, Captain. Because from where I sit, this looks like the most spectacular string of insubordination I have ever seen." or the best piece of intelligence work in this theater. I'm not sure which. This was it. The conflict. She could tell the truth, or she could deliver the narrative. She had to justify her actions, knowing that any part of her story could be used to hang her, or more likely, Thorn. "General," Elena said, her voice steady, "I was ordered to find a leak. I followed the data. The noise was the only place the data was clean. It led me to the sundown signal. It led me to the DIA. It led me to the truth." "And the kill order?" the general asked. Commander Thorn had PID on an HVT preparing to execute a prisoner. He made the correct call. I had different intel. I had a waveform, a single word. It was a call I had to make. Pritchard sniffed. "A waveform. She's admitting it. She gambled, and this time she got lucky." "That's enough, Pritchard," Thorn said, his voice a low growl. He stood up. He looked not at the general, but at Elena. Then he turned to the head of the table. "The op was a success, General. We recovered a DIA asset, Agent Kale, who your agency listed as dead. We captured the real alchemist, the man who's been funding this entire insurgency, the one in the chair. And we did it." He paused. "Because Captain Markova's intel was better than ours. It was better than mine. It was better than the DIA's. He put his hands on the table. "She didn't get lucky. She was right. She was right when I was wrong. She was right when the DIA was cowardly. She saw the why when the rest of us were just looking for the where. The mission succeeded not in spite of her actions, but because of them." He looked at Elena, a full public validation. It wasn't just respect. It was an apology. It was a surrender. "Her methods," Thorn finished, "were unorthodox, but they were the only ones that mattered. She's the reason Kale is alive, and the alchemist is in our custody. That is my official report." The general stared at Thorn, then at Elena. He looked at Pritchard, whose face was pale. The general nodded slowly. "Report received, Commander." Elena was packing her gear. Her closet was empty. Her main floor station was already being reassigned. Her tour was over. Kale was in a hospital in Germany. The alchemist was on a plane to a black site. The war moved on. She was zipping her duffel bag when Thorn walked up. He wasn't in uniform. He was in civvies, a faded t-shirt and jeans, looking smaller without his armor, more human. They stood in the silence of the empty talk for a moment. "You're not staying for the medal," he said. It wasn't a question. "They're giving me a medal so they don't have to court-martial you, sir," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "Seems like a fair trade." He huffed, a sound that might have been a laugh. He held out his hand. In his palm was a small cardboard box. "For your AAR," he said. She opened it. Inside, nestled on white cotton, was a single, massive, spent sniper round, the 300 Win Mag. She looked up, confused. "You're not a sniper, Captain," he said. His voice was rough, no humor in it at all, only a deep, profound respect that he would never be able to say in words. "On that rooftop I had the rifle, I had the training, I had the PID, and I was wrong." He gently closed her fingers around the brass casing. "You," he said, "were 5,000 kilometers away. You had noise, and you didn't miss. You were the weapon." He nodded, a sharp, final gesture. "Safe travels, Captain Markova." "Commander Thorn," she replied, nodding back. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing on the raised floor. Elena closed her hand around the bullet, its weight heavy and real, a final, silent answer to the taunt that had started it all.